My real pleasure and privilege to be sitting with Dr. Kumar, who I've seen so long, admired so much, and first of all, thank you so much for sparing time. And I know after 1.5 years, I think you're doing this on a stage. So really, thank you, and thank you for that inspiring talk. Very encouraging, very inspiring. I think we need to buy local and go global now, all of us. So. You alluded to my actually first question, which I had, Dr. Kumar, which was about Prime Minister's vision of India being a $5 trillion economy and a global superpower by 2024-25. Now, we've had the global pandemic, but do you, where do you think we stand on that target today?
Well, that target is surely pushed out because we pretty much lost 2 years. The 2021 and 21-22. So, and therefore, we will now reach in March of 22 where we were in March of 1920. That is what will happen to us. So therefore, and it's a serious one because I think, but which is why I emphasize the need to achieve 8%. 22, 23 going forward, going onwards. We are about now $2.12 trillion economy at the moment, which is what we should have become, sort of 8% more each year, but haven't. So I think the $5 trillion economy would be, as I said, pushed out those 2 years. But my own thought is, Ankit, that I think um, we need to think beyond the $5 trillion economy because this is all very well, but we now need to sort of think of ourselves. See, if we grow at 8%, we kind of double the economy about every 10.5 years. Given the exponents and so on. So we should think of those terms as to how we double it and shorten that period if we can. I was talking. I was the chief economist of the CII, and they used to do these sums that can India be a double-digit economy? And we have achieved 10% at some point of time. And we have 2003 to 2011, we achieved 8.3% for those whole 8 years. So I think we should now strive for a double-digit growth. And I think some states are already doing it, and the entire country can do it. And double-digit growth should be the target to go for.
Absolutely. In fact, there is a lot of public perception about, and there's a lot of negativity about China, right? Especially around the theories around origin of COVID-19. Do you think India, and especially given the Make in India push that the government has got an unprecedented advantage at this stage to really make a catch up for where China is? Do you think we can really take advantage of the negative perception China finds itself today in?
Yeah. Let me put it differently because I think what's more important is that now the India story is a very positive one abroad. People are looking at India with a lot more interest than what there was earlier. Now, China is one of the factors, because people are trying to move out, etc., and so on. But I think that's not the key driver. The key driver is the fact, and this is out of conversations with a lot of people, is that India is trying quite honestly to improve the environment for doing business in our country. The World Bank ease of doing business is there, and we have jumped whatever number of ranks we have done. But the Prime Minister's announcement about in his Independence Day speech to reduce regulatory and compliance burden and asking every state and every line ministry to do so. Take the redundant laws out of the books. 1,200 have been removed already. Asking the states. I have taken 3 meetings with the chief secretaries of the northeastern states, telling them to identify the kind of thing. And somebody has come, believe me, 400, sir, 600, sir, which can be done away with. I mean, they themselves say that never was there a pressure like that, to make, and it's now the states where the rubber meets the road, where you need all these construction clearances and utility licenses and Shop and Establishment Act, and so on and so forth. Now, I think that word is spreading. And I think to that extent, I at least find that that there's a huge amount of interest in the other countries about the investment opportunity that India offers. And the PLI scheme has triggered another wave. Apple has now come in, and now its vendors are all coming in. Samsung has done this, and now they're making use of it. And I'm hoping that all the 13 industries will therefore see that kind of growth. So I'm really saying that yes, China, it's all, but it's much more important to build a positive story and keep strengthening it, because investment will come not because there are n number of places where people can move out of China to. So why would it's the India story? For example, the small and medium enterprises, the raising of their ceilings, it enables them to become a part of the regional and global production chains, which they were never able to have before. They were born small, they remained small, and they died small, or they were inherited small. Now that can change. So that's the thought. So
So you spoke of a lot of priorities, as Chairman of Niti Aayog, and I can truly imagine somebody in your role. What are your top three priorities that you focus on today?
one is of course innovation, and to just completely. I mean, I'm actually rather dismayed, and I can admit it. You see that we in India still invest, from figures that I have, less than 1% of our GDP on R&D. Figure is about 0.8, I think. And out of that 0.8, 80% comes out of public sector. So the Indian private companies are hardly investing in R&D at all. And without R&D, without product innovation, you can't grow. I mean, the S curve is there only for those who bring out new products. And that's a clear sign. It's also, for me, it's a signal that Indian companies, Indian entrepreneurs, surely don't find the rate of return in innovation than what they find in cutting down processes or labor costs, or working with the government in appointing so-called, what are they called? Government relation officers, all of that, So that has to change. And that's the first priority. How do we get our system? The Honorable Prime Minister talks about reducing the distance between the lab and the land. The CSR system, amazing system that we've got. So for example, another initiative that we're taking with the Principal Scientific Advisor is to create clusters of R&D institutes. You know that there are 43 R&D institutes in Delhi funded by the government who never interact with each other. We want to break down those silos and get people. We have appointed in some cities CEOs who will help bring about an interaction, because unless different disciplines interact, I mean, just as an example, the best biomedical research will come from when AIIMS starts interacting with the Indian Statistical Institute. So that's the big data analysis that you could get. Yeah. So those sorts of things. Now we are setting that up in five cities: Delhi, Pune, Bangalore, Chandigarh, and there's one more. I forget. So innovation is the first. Second is agriculture, and agriculture, because we've done amazing things with Green Revolution, but and Niti Aayog, we have presented this data to the Indian Agricultural Research Institute and the Ministry of Agriculture, that globally we are just completely uncompetitive. So the grains that we are producing, the stuff that we are producing, we can neither consume nor export. So what will happen? So what we need is a complete rethink on the Indian agriculture and related agro-processing and value added. There's a huge amount of thing to be done. There's massive money to be made. The rates of return are enormous. There are those who want to get onto that. But it needs completely a different reimagining, which is why the 3 agriculture laws that were declared, which will give the farmer the freedom to sell anywhere, for the investor to come in, etc., facilitate corporate investment and so on. And one of the things that at least it might be in the bonnet, is not Niti Aayog's official policy, is to try and push for chemical-free agriculture. And I call it the Bharatiya Prakritik Krishi Paddhati, and it's been done. 30 lakh farmers are already practicing it. It's different from organic farming because organic farming tries to replace, organic manure for chemical fertilizer. That doesn't work. It's a completely different science, and you got to start. You have to trigger the microbial activity in the soil for the soil to start absorbing carbon from the soil, from the atmosphere, and so on. So I can't. But agriculture is, of course, the second big priority, and the third priority, if I may say, is education, because the demographic dividend will not be achieved if we don't take. Now these 2 years have been very hard. What percentage of people do you think in India, children, have access to online education? Now we've done lots of work there. The education ministry has done lots of work. Their programs online. Diksha has got 60,000 courses there and so on. We know what MOOCs are about and so on. But the point is that the child out there, 50% of them at least, if not more, and a much larger percentage of female children are pretty much now, have suffered in these 2 years. So what do we do for them? And how do we take education down to that level so that the quality, standard, talk that in the classroom, and Pratham's Asar keeps, showing it up all the time, that the teaching is done only for the first 2 rows of the children. The rest are left to themselves. Has to change. And how will it change? For example, I'm at the moment working on and rather worried about preschool learning. You get into school at grade age 6. But all of us, our children start learning at the age of 2. Does that happen to others? So education, and various levels of education, and even higher education. How many universities and institutes are in the top 100 of the world rankings? I mean, I don't want to say, so therefore I will not. But it's not so those 3. But then there's more. There's water conservation, there's climate. India has to accept the binding carbon constraint on its development. So, but we can go on, and this is Niti Aayog's vast agenda. But those 3 would be my top.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more than on the innovation bit. A lot of innovation happening in the world is done by Indians. It's just not done in India, though. So, you spoke about different schemes that different programs Niti Aayog is running. There are so many, achievements that you've got under your belt. You've got the Ayushman Bharat, you've got the PLI scheme, aspirational district program, which I think is a wonderful program trying to raise 112 districts in the country, the most backward ones. Atal Innovation Mission, Poshan Abhiyan. Which one are you most proud of? Which is the one which gives you maximum satisfaction when you go to bed and you feel, yes?
I can't rank them myself. That does not be fair. Also because, many of these are still to produce their outcomes and the output. And given that we are emphasizing outcome-based performance evaluation, I can't yet say. But I think, the ones which have performed already is, for example, Ayushman Bharat, which has made available. But again, there a lot more needs to be done, because, so let me just say that this is all work in progress. So there is no reason for me to rank any of that. But EV is a good thing. Now it's coming to a tipping point where I think with the, you might well see states declaring dates for 100% EV for 2 or 3 wheelers, and then maybe for more. So I think there's it's beginning to happen, and which is why I'm so optimistic and so bullish on the Indian story beyond the pandemic, because I think things are now in the process. And I was talking to a very senior business person, and on a flight back from Bombay just now, and there is something like a buzz which will happen, but let's see. And prior to that, I don't want to rank our own achievements.
For the sake of everyone, there are 7 pillars of Niti Aayog: pro people, proactivity, participation, empowering, inclusion for all, equality, and transparency. Dr. Kumar, which one do you find most challenging?
Um, I don't know which one is the seven.
Pro people,
If you want me to rank them, I'll have to put them in my mind again.
pro people, proactivity, participation, empowering, inclusion for
All of
all.
them. I think the participation bit is the most difficult because people still don't expect government to invite participation. When we were preparing our document on India at 75, and I recommend, by the way, everybody to read it. It's got 41 chapters, each one exactly about 1,200 words, 1,300 words. So it's written in a very successful, and we consulted 730 people from outside the government. And it's all mentioned, their names are all mentioned there. So we are trying our best, and now each vertical in Niti Aayog is required to meet with external people, external expertise, at least once a quarter. So whether they're working on environment or small scale industry, whoever, or water or whatever. So we want to engage, but participation of the CSOs, for example, and into the government. We've got our Darpan portal, where I think about 60,000 NGOs are already registered, and so we need to work with them. But that's the most, because I say why I do this, because we still don't have a culture of all of the stakeholders working together and trusting each other. We still, and that's just has to change. If the country has to go. The Prime Minister talks about creating a Jan Abhiyan. And I always use this analogy. 1942, Indian independence movement was going pretty much nowhere until Mahatma Gandhi converted that to a people's movement by the Quit India call. Now we need a people's movement for development. That everybody believes that they are working for the same cause. And that spirit has to, that will involve, that will lead to participation. But that's the most difficult one.
Fantastic. We all have bosses, right? But I don't think anyone sitting in this room has the Prime Minister of India as their boss. We really want to understand, how is our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji as a boss?
Very hard taskmaster. He hasn't taken a day's leave in the last 7 years, not that I know of, and has a huge memory. So therefore, he remembers whatever targets he gave you, and but also amazingly patient listener. If you got an idea, he will give you whatever time, to explain it to him, and also lets you be once get on with it, as it were. So quite a remarkable person in many ways, but also the fact that he sees things in a way that at least I have not been able to, as to how it's like a jigsaw, thing that you've got. So everybody talked about bottom of the pyramid, that, Antodaya was the BJP's standard line, but how to achieve that? So he thought of Aadhaar, popularized it. Now you know that, they got 1.2. From Aadhaar you came to the Jan Dhan, because people said direct benefit transfers. What do you do? So therefore, 430 million new accounts. Then the transfer of 403 schemes, government schemes, to direct benefit transfer. So all of that then became one sort of whole, but each one is a separate scheme, if you like. So the way he can conceive of things and is very inspiring, honestly. And then his vision for India is an amazing one, which is that he thinks of India as a new, that we have a destiny, and he keeps quoting Vivekananda, We have a destiny to be the Vishwaguru, and we have the capability to do so, but somehow we are not being able to find it or bring it all together. I think that's the way to, and therefore, most fortunate in some sense to have to have him as my boss, as it were.
Yeah, I'm really, really enjoying this discussion, but and I can keep on asking questions, but I do understand that we have, esteemed guests with us, and they would also want to have a few questions. So if you allow me, I'm going to open it to the people sitting in this hall now. Please, come out with your questions for Dr. Kumar. We will have ushers who can help you with mics, and if you can just raise your hands, and we'll have the person moving on to you. Any questions for Dr. Kumar, please?
Thank you, Dr. Rajiv. You seem to be from planet Earth. Earlier, the popular perception about planning commission is that planning commission consists of people from a different planet who will tell us what to do, and you seem to be more mortal, just like any of us. So it's refreshing to hear that the transformation of Niti Aayog from planning commission, because planning commission, as I know, is more authoritative and which will tell you what to do rather than your version of Niti Aayog, which is more consultative. And it's a refreshing change for government to thinking that corporations and governments also as stakeholders. So that's a refreshing change, a very refreshing one at that. So thank you for that, for enlightening us about the process of Niti Aayog. So I have two questions. One as an entrepreneur or from the corporate. The popular perception after the whole corona pandemic is that India is the next best option to China. As Ankit said, because of the sheer size of their economy, the demographic and the local market it has. But the data from Nomura Financial, which states that between April 2018 to May 2019, there are about 56 companies which relocated their production from China to outside of China. And surprisingly, only 2 companies came to India. The rest of the companies went to, most of them went to Indonesia, to Vietnam, to Thailand, to other countries. So I think it is a kind of a myth to think that India being an automatic destination. Now that the whole China story is being questioned, now India have to do something to really attract companies out there. So I think what is Niti Aayog doing to encourage for more companies to set up their base in India?
Thanks for saying good things about Niti Aayog. So that's always a pleasure. But we must understand which of the companies there in China who moved out. Most of these were Japanese and Taiwanese companies. I've looked into it. I've actually contacted a large number of 18 actually, not a very large number of Japanese CEOs which our embassy in Tokyo said where their companies were trying to move out, etc. They find, now this is 2 things. One, that the Southeast Asian region is far better. They're much more conversant with that. I was in Manila for 10 years working with the Asian Development Bank. And so I know what the Japanese and the Chinese or Taiwanese sort of way they act. They know that area, whether it's Thailand or Indonesia or Philippines and so on. That's one part of it. The second part of it is that the Japanese especially have not had a great run in the past. And they think about the ease of doing business here. Everything goes by word of mouth. So as I said in response to Amit's question, it's much, much, much more important at this time to change that whole perception, and to make and to put out to the people out there that the government and everybody is actually seriously and honestly trying to change that, because the perception otherwise will remain or is that very difficult to do business. You go there, you got to have a stamina. What persistence, perseverance, and patience are the three P's for success in India. We need to change that. So I think we're working on it. As I said, I'm not very concerned about companies moving out of China because there's a large number of other companies. But the more important thing, if you allow me to say it, is that we have to take care much more of our domestic investors. If we do that, the word will go out. And I think for me, that's the key. Let's think 97% of total investment comes from domestic investors. FDI only gives you 3 to 4%. And that is where Niti Aayog is focused upon. And as I said, I've been taking 3 meetings in the last 3 months, 4 months with the chief secretaries of all the northeastern states to tell us and make a list of all the regulatory burdens and compliances that are there and to try and remove them. Why? Because all our domestic companies must feel that they have some freedom and space, and backing of the government, rather than government being seen as a rent seeker, which is what it becomes very often. So that's my answer to you, which is that I'm not very concerned about any particular country, but I need to change the story. And some people tell me, I hope it's wrong, that there are domestic investors who are moving out, into other jurisdictions. The first priority for us should be to stop that, if that is true, and find out, what's happening. So I think that's the way I want to look at the issue of investment and investor sentiment and the ease of doing business, especially in the states, which is where we are now very heavily engaged, because we know that the action in Delhi has gone a long way, and we now need to work in the states.
The second question is that, it's more, I hail from Andhra Pradesh. So as a citizen of Andhra Pradesh, as I know it's a little sensitive question for you to answer. So, the whole issue of Andhra Pradesh being carved out of Telangana, which is, probably the youngest states in India. I think we've seen, quite a bit of churn after being carved out of Telangana. So, as you know, the slugfest of, special status, which has been promised, which is not given. So I know it is sensitive for you to answer this question, but it is the whole slugfest between the center and the state. As you rightly mentioned in your address, as the difference between Gujarat and Uttarakhand is very different, and then each state has its own nuances or advances or so. So in this regard, keeping the sensitivity in your mind, so is there any specific thing that Niti Aayog is doing to compensate, or having a helping hand to Andhra Pradesh as such, because we've lost so much out of division. So, as a citizen of Andhra Pradesh,
I think I'll take you up on my sensitivity thing and I'll dodge the question, if I may.
I understand.
It is actually very sensitive.
Sure, I understand.
I would not like to comment on it. Yeah.
Sure, thanks.
Don't mind my saying it, but we can talk about it in the private.
Sure, thanks.
Sure. The gentleman, please. And can I request you to just, for the sake of everyone, your name and the organization that you represent, please. Thanks. Okay, we'll have you after that, sir. Yes, please.
Hi, sir. Good evening. It's a pleasure to listen to you, and the way that you spoke, it is really very heartening, the way that you're working with the Prime Minister. My name is Pankaj Dubey. And Pankaj Dubey. I am a co-founder of an American company, and I've worked in the Indian industry in the EV space. So we are setting up in India the largest plant for lithium-ion battery manufacturing.
Oh, yeah.
With an American who is an ex-SpaceX engineer.
Wonderful.
So we are setting up this in the EV space, and we are looking at all the hassles which are there, why India has not succeeded in the EV in the last 20 years. Efforts has been made, but because of the poor quality of imports and whatever, various reasons, infrastructure has not been set up. And having understood all of that, we have come out with a solution which is like a complete 360-degree. We'll set up the infrastructure, we'll make the battery, and we'll make it happen. And as you said, there are so many rules which are there, which are making it very complex, whether charging stations are being set up, then all the we are saying that it's going to be green, but the backup charging is to be done from the grids, which are mostly producing from coal. So in a way, we are making green, but the back end, everything is burning of that. So I would like to understand what you are doing on that. But the second question, which is for me is very important, is that for India to progress a lot, it's very important that we develop some indigenous technology. Now, this lithium ion is, China has taken most of the places, the lithium ion factories. And so even if we do a lot of EV sales, a lot of benefit will go indirectly to China. And in our endeavor to go to number one economy or number two economy, it always be a challenge to beat China, because every time that we grow in this field, they will gain more. Now, we have a lot of technology which is being used, but it's somehow we have not commercialized it. Like a Gobar gas plant, it has been done very effectively in some areas, but everywhere small efforts have happened. Nobody has thought about it, making an engineering excellence. And that is where R&D has to happen. What were the problem? What problems have been faced? How can we make it so that in rural India, there's a totally a green activity, but no emissions, everything is very nice. But we haven't been able to get it together. And the R&D budget that you spoke about, 0.8%, is something where we need to really increase or see the private participation, but look at very openly, how can we do something like that? Or we find an alternate energy source, which is like, I keep joking about that if you can figure out what was the fuel used in Pushpak Viman, in which Ravan took Sita ji from India to Sri Lanka. So then that must be something local. It must not have been imported from Saudi Arabia. But that requires a lot of efforts to figure out what it is and how can we change that. And that will definitely make our economy to grow to number one or number two very soon. So my question to you is, sir, that if any efforts is being made for looking at alternate energy being developed here.
Alternate energy. Yeah. So one, congratulations for setting up the lithium ion. And you know that there is a PLI scheme for advanced chemistry cells. So please make use of that and do set up a globally comparable plant, as it were. Also, I think we are trying to work a lot on recycling of lithium. And there's a good company called Atero, I think, which is now building even a plant in Wisconsin, I think, for that. But they're also working here, some IIT boys, and working Niti Aayog is working with them quite closely. So that apart. And on the alternate energy, we are doing a lot of things. I mentioned to you about green hydrogen, and the Prime Minister himself announced, I think, on the Independence Day, that there is a green hydrogen mission which is being established, which has been established now, and there's serious work at the moment going on, and green, not blue and grey, but green hydrogen, which will come from solar, using solar power, and converting. Now there is one company in Pune, which I don't mind naming them, called Praj Industries, which is now at the cusp of, they already got the plant of converting bio waste to ethanol, and then from ethanol they can convert that to hydrogen. They can again break that to hydrogen. They are, by the way, setting up 3 very big plants for using agro waste, one in Panipat and the other 2, all the 3 oil majors, 400 tons a day or more, of using agro waste to convert them to ethanol. Because ethanol is alternate energy, because then that's the mix, and you've got the T20 target, right, the 20%. My own member, Dr. Saraswat, is working very significantly on methanol, to also do that, again to use our own agro products to go there, because these will all replace fossil fuel. Now, our major thing, as I said, was, and the NTPC chairman, who was with us the other day, is talking about the fact that we could be an economy which is solar plus hydrogen. And that's the way to go forward. Now, but at the same time, you have to recognize that you've got these huge coal reserves, and we've got, at the moment, something like 65% of our energy coming out of coal, 67%, I think, of coal. What will we do with that? We'll be left stranded with those coals. So we are actually thinking about and working on a very significant coal gasification project, in situ coal gasification. so that within the seams you could do that, and then you could use that gas to convert to, again, because that's hydrocarbon, to get to ethanol and methanol and so on. But the missing point are two. One, which is large-scale battery storage, because you need that to overcome the seasonality of solar. And you know the solar targets, 450 gigawatts, the Prime Minister has talked about, and can even go up and so on. And now we're talking about hybrid. But the battery storage is what is the key, large-scale battery storage, because that is what you will need to overcome the peaks and so on, and seasonality. And the second one is some form of carbon sequestration, which is what we need, because if you're going to use up the coal. So we've got alternate energy is, I should have mentioned it, one of my priorities. But I did mention in the sense that India has to take cognizance of the carbon, I call it the binding carbon constraint, and that's what we have. So we cannot grow on the basis of what the other economies did in the past, that grow whichever way you like and then we'll retrofit later. That option is not open to us. And therefore we need to, so alternate energy green energy is a very important thing for us. We are looking, I can't go on and on. This morning we had a good presentation on the difficult to abate sectors, cement and iron and so on, where we want to bring fossil out, coal out, and bring in hydrogen. So you will see announcement of the green hydrogen mission soon, and some other steps being taken there, and several other things. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to tell you that we have developed a technology where we can use the lithium cells for about 18 to 20 years in a different cycles. And also we are setting up stationary storage systems in America, and we will be participating.
Bring it here.
We will definitely bring it here as well.
Bring it here, and let me know if you face any difficulty in doing so.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. The gentleman in the middle, please. Yes, please.
Right. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm Kamal Verma from Triveni Engineering and Industries Limited. And I just wanted to take some cue from the earlier gentleman from Andhra Pradesh. He mentioned about the compliance requirement. In fact, the large companies, the compliance requirement is so huge, so they end up hiring a consultant to look after the compliance. There are thousands of compliances, which doesn't make any sense. And second point is, we may have improved in ease of doing business, but on ground, there are a lot of area to be covered. And one important topic is the labor reforms. I remember I used to work 10 years back in Hajira in a company. During construction, they hired 1 lakh labor, 1 lakh workmen, and not a single workman was hired directly. They all were hired through the different subcontractors because of the labor laws. The labor laws which were prepared to look after the labor welfare, they are actually working against them. So my question is, what are the big reforms you are looking in next 1-2 years in the country?
Yeah, so labor reforms, I didn't mention them in my talk, but you know that we have codified about 50 labor laws into 3 labor codes. And we have given all the flexibility for the state governments to go right up to whatever level they want to before labor laws and labor inspectors and social security norms, etc., kick in. So I think that's already been done to a very large extent. And again, those were things which were initiated in Niti Aayog, and so I don't think now there should be a complaint about lack of flexibility in employing labor. I think there is, and the other part of it is that I mentioned it so many times, so I don't need to say it again maybe, but thanks for repeating it, that we know that there are regulatory burdens. We want to remove them. If you have a list of 1,000, please send it. I will take it up and I'll work on that particular sector that you're talking about. But the thing is that not many people from the industry, unfortunately, are willing to send me those lists. There is still perhaps this fear, that who will do. But we are trying to roll back the labor inspectors. We are trying to roll back the social security norms. We are saying that make EPFO, voluntary if you want to. Manish Agarwal keeps talking about the Parchi wali tankha and the Haath wali tankha. We want to reduce the difference, because we want to ultimately remove this dualism that exists in India between the organized and the unorganized sector. That's what is killing us. Only hardly 20% of our workforce is in the organized sector because of the same reason that you mentioned, because all the laws work, for them to remain. So we are trying, but again, these are legacy issues of decades. You might have noticed in the last 7 years, there hasn't been a significant trade union movement, because of what we are trying to do, and so that, but it takes time, and it takes time, but also it takes an effort on the part of the industry to do its own bit as well. So I think that's the part of it. And then about the next 2 years of reforms, etc. My answer to that is that it's now much more important to implement what we have done rather than take further leaps, because I think a lot has been done already in many ways. If all that has been done can be implemented on the ground in the states, India will be a different country altogether. And I think that's but the reforms that are needed, in my view, are in the banking, in the financial sector, in a very big way, in the electricity sector, in the energy sector, discoms and so on and so forth, in the integration of our transport network. I mean, it's impossible, that in every city, you have 6 different agencies looking after transport, and they don't, integrate. So that's the other one. Urban planning is a very big reform. We don't have it. There are 4,000 urban local bodies, but 67% of them don't have urban planners. So the only point about urban planning is how to make sure that you pay your registration stamp duty. So there's so many areas that we need to work on. But yeah, but that's what, as I said also, we need to consolidate. But again, all of this will happen if I think the basic, what I talked about, the trust between the stakeholders first is brought about. Without that, nothing will be possible. Because otherwise, we'll keep working at cross purposes. And that takes my attention at the moment. How to do that, how to develop that. That is not us and them, it's us all together. So, and that's where I would expect all of you to tell us, and all of you to also start that process of believing and acting as if we are on the same page rather than on 2 different sort of pulpits.
Yeah, I think we've never seen a more approachable Niti Aayog. And thank you so much for that, Dr. Kumar. Last 2 questions, and we'll wrap up, please, because the lady in the end, if we can have, Dr. Kumar is saying that will be the last. I know he's already overstretched and he's got a morning schedule he was talking about. So, so just last question, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much for recognizing from the last one. I'm Meenu Singh, and I'm Managing Director of Nuvia India. It's a subsidiary of a French company, and we are into the nuclear engineering services. So my question to you is that there's all of a sudden a lot of thrust on Make in India. But at the same time, in any forum you go, we use the word innovation, innovation, innovation a lot. But then we see Make in India being taken the more thrust. So
Make in India is what?
Make in India for the manufacturing, that the new public procurement policy, which specifies that you need to be following the Make in India policy, wherein you need to have a 20% or 50% of localization to be done in India to be a class 1 or a class 2 supplier. So my question is that, should it not be made in India or develop in India first, then make in India? If I'm correct, clear on my question.
So to foster innovation.
Straight answer, it should be researched in India, it should be designed in India, it should be developed in India, it should be made in India. But the point is, let's start somewhere. And at the moment, let's start and make in India. Which is that if we actually start there, then the backward linkages will take place. And please do notice that I did emphasize a lot on the R&D and all the innovation, etc. So I'm absolutely with you. Yes, of course, that it should be made and developed, etc. But then that's the challenge to the corporate sector. It's not the government's job to do that. Please understand that. That it has to be the the entrepreneurs, the investors, and the manufacturers who will have to do it. Because, you know, all of that, I mean, you know, how, yeah.
Yeah, well, I agree that it is the entrepreneurs, it is the private sector who has to make the investment. So when it comes to Make in India, it is like, okay, you are doing it, it's a guaranteed business. But when you talk about develop in India, there has to have a public-private partnership. So
Yes.
how is that being taken?
Have I not emphasized it enough?
No,
You want
you
me
did.
to- do
You
want
did
to-
that. What I said that innovation is
sorry?
the one.
Sorry?
You did emphasize on that. You did. But at ground reality, it is more of emphasizing what is happening.
So
is
let's
on
try and
Make in
change
India.
it, no? Let's try and work together to change it.
Sure.
Because,
So-
yes, I accept the ground reality, but the point is to change it. And that's where we need to need to make a beginning. And, you know, things are changing. I mean, that's the optimistic part. Things are changing. Wherever I go, I find that there is more, the government is more accessible. The people are talking. There is not the same hierarchy, and it's being led from the front by the Prime Minister. You know, who is so. And again, I repeat my request: wherever you find that things are not changing or could change for the better, please send us your comments. Please send us your inputs, and we'll do our best to do that. Niti Aayog is in the business of trying to make that change. That's our motto. So please help us do it.
Sure. Thank you so much.
I mean, we heard him. We heard his vision for India. We heard his vision of changing India. And through him, you know, we all know what our Honorable Prime Minister is, you know, looking for this country to be. So thank you so much, Dr. Kumar. Thank you so much for this session. Thank you so much for those, you know, candid conversation, inspiring words, insights that you brought about. Can we have a loud round of applause for Dr. Kumar, please?